This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Thailand's Prime Minister in China receiving praise from President Xi on Bangkok's measures to combat online gambling and fraud. Meantime, China slams Australia for banning DeepSeek from government devices. But Canberra isn't alone. South Korea is also taking similar steps to block the chatbot's access to defense and trade ministries. Kyiv officials say that North Korean ballistic missiles used by Russian forces are more precise now than Moscow's past barrages in its war on Ukraine. And taking stock of the fallout from Donald Trump's tariffs, Hong Kong dismisses concerns about the policy's impact, but economists are concerned about how Macau will be affected. Also in East Asia tonight, the shunning of full-time jobs, a growing trend among Hong Kong Gen Z youths, favoring part-time work over climbing the corporate ladder. We delve into this phenomenon. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for deeper trust and cooperation with Thailand as he met Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra in Beijing. Well, he says this cooperation is in order to deal with growing uncertainties in the world. And he also praised China-Thailand relations, pointing to how both countries have cooperated on the basis of mutual respect and equality over the past few decades. Well, this is Ms. Paetongtarn's first official visit to the Chinese capital since she took office in August. Her trip also marks 50 years of bilateral ties with China. Both sides are looking to work together in areas such as economy, law enforcement and security. Well, for more on this, we are joined now by CNA's Tan Si-Hui in Beijing, and she has been monitoring this visit very closely. Si-Hui, first up, perhaps could take us through what were some of the key points being discussed between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn.
Well, the main thing is that China and Thailand have reaffirmed strong ties amid a volatile external environment. And this meeting comes shortly just after US President Donald Trump slapped China with 10% additional tariffs on all Chinese goods. So this could be seen as China trying to consolidate its friendship with its closest allies. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping has called on closer, deeper cooperation with Thailand in areas such as digital economy as well as energy vehicles. He had also cited projects such as the China-Thailand Railway. Now, Thailand Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra, she had also called on closer cooperation in areas such as trade, economy, as well as agriculture, and she called this relationship between China and Thailand a special cooperative relationship. And this comes after both sides are celebrating 50 years of friendship, and they called on another 50 years of close cooperation. Now, Ms. Paetongtarn Shinawatra, she's expected to sign 14 agreements in areas including nuclear technology as well as connectivity. Now, China remains a key economic partner for Thailand. In fact, it is a top trading partner for the 12th consecutive year for Thailand. China is also one of the top investors into Thailand, with investments exceeding $100 billion.
And so, what about telecom fraud, though? I mean, are there steps or more steps being taken to address this after their meeting?
Well, tackling online frauds is one of the key priorities of Ms. Paetongtarn Shinawatra's visit here to China. This comes after a very viral incident that happened in January when a Chinese actor, Wang Xing, he had come to Thailand in the hopes of seeking an acting gig, only to go missing early in January, and he was eventually rescued in a Myanmar call center. And so there's a lot of fear among Chinese visitors traveling to Thailand. In fact, estimates show that $37 billion have been lost to victims in East and Southeast Asia in 2023. And Chinese tourists continue to make up a very crucial component of Thailand tourism. And so Thailand Prime Minister, she has said that she will vow, and Thailand will vow, to do more in tackling these online scams. And she said that the greatest priority for Thailand is the safety of tourists as well as their citizens. And so she said that Thailand will implement a systematic warning mechanism. She had also called on China to look into online platforms into stopping the spread of misinformation about tourism in China. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that he is appreciative of what Thailand is doing and has said that they will step up cooperation in security as well as safeguard the lives of their citizens, as well as increase cooperation among regional countries such as Cambodia and Myanmar. Now, Ms. Paetongtarn Shinawat's visit to China will last till February 8th. She will be meeting Thai businessmen and associations here in China. She will also be seeking out the loan of pandas. But she will be leaving Beijing, which is where I'm at. She will be going to Harbin on Friday. She will be attending the opening of the 9th Asian Winter Games, and she'll be meeting Thai athletes there. She will also visit the Ice and Snow World Festival.
Oh, a lot of visits for her. Well, thanks so very much for that report. CNA's Tan Si-hui live in Beijing. Meantime, the Thai Prime Minister is among a number of Asian leaders visiting China following the Chinese New Year holiday. President Xi today also welcomed the Sultan of Brunei, Hassanal Bolkiah, in a ceremony at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. The Sultan's visit is aimed at reinforcing bilateral ties and expanding cooperation in areas of mutual interest. Yesterday, the Chinese leader met with his Pakistani counterpart, Asif Ali Zardari, with the security of Chinese investments in a South Asian nation among topics in focus. Mr. Xi also said that Beijing will work with Islamabad on their respective paths of modernization. South Korea is the latest country taking action against China's DeepSeek AI. Several ministries in the country have blocked access on official devices, citing security concerns.
일부 업무용으로 이제 인터넷을 활용하는데 그 인터넷에도 필요한 보안 대책 등은 다 강구되어 있습니다. 지금 말씀하시는 생성형 AI와 관련돼서 요즘 기술적인 또는 보안상의 우려가 있는 것은 저도 알고 있고 필요한 조치를 선제적으로 하거나 또는 관련 부처와 후속 조치를 해 나갈 예정입니다. 그런 부분에 대해서 우리 장병들이 활용하고 있는 모바일에 대해서도 저희가 아시겠지만 필요한 보안 대책이 강구되어 있는데 앞으로도 보안 대책을 더욱 강구할 것이고 또 이런 것이 수록된 국방 AI 보안 가이드 이런 것을 배포해서 전군이 활용하고 있습니다.
South Korea joins a growing list of countries that have placed restrictions on the AI chatbot. Australia and Taiwan earlier this week banned its use on all government devices. The U.S. state of Texas, as well as several federal agencies, have also banned the bot, while a bill has been introduced seeking to make it illegal for Americans to download it. Italy has removed it from its app stores, and several European countries have also launched probes due to security concerns. Concerns presently center largely around the application's security and data practices, as researchers say they found evidence of links between the bot and a Chinese state-owned telecommunications company. Beijing, however, has refuted those concerns, saying that the Chinese government has never and will never require companies or individuals to illegally collect or store data. Dr. Toby Walsh from the University of New South Wales tells us about the main security risks associated with DeepSeek.
But there's concerns around privacy and concerns around malware. Privacy in the sense that if you type something into the chatbot, you're sharing it with DeepSeek in China. And you shouldn't be typing anything sensitive into anyone's chatbot, not ChatGPT. You're sharing it with a company in the US. Similarly, you shouldn't be typing anything sensitive into a chatbot in China because, well, who knows who's going to end up with the data. And then issues around malware. You can actually download, one of the novelties of DeepSeek is that it's open source. You can actually download it and run it on your computer, but that might be potentially introducing some malware. I think the threat is very real. They are already being used in many respects to personalize malware and cyber attacks. So it's something that we should be very concerned about. I think this perhaps, though, heralds the start of a fracturing of the AI world. We saw this with the internet. We have two internets. We have the Western internet, and then behind the Great Firewall of China, we have the Chinese internet. And there's very little competition between the two. I fear that we may end up in the same place with a Chinese version of AI and a Western version of AI.
The South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has attended the sixth hearing of his impeachment trial over his botched martial law bid in December. Well, in court, he rebutted a testimony made by a former military commander who said that he received orders to remove lawmakers from the National Assembly. Lieutenant General Kwak Jong-kun, the then chief of the Army Special Warfare Command, said that he had received a phone call from Yoon on the night of the martial law. He said the president ordered him to remove, quote, figures from the National Assembly. He interpreted that as lawmakers. In response, Yoon said he did not specifically use the word figures or lawmakers and that he had never asked for lawmakers to be dragged, which went against both him and former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun's testimonies given last month. Kim had said Yoon asked for, quote, agents to be dragged out. Yoon's impeachment trial began late December, and the court has until end of June to decide whether or not to remove him from office permanently or reinstate him. Prosecutors have separately indicted the leader on charges of leading an insurrection and abuse of power. He has been held at a detention center since his arrest last month. Yoon became the first sitting South Korean president to be arrested after facing allegations of insurrection related to his short-lived martial law decree in December. Breaks up next, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, calls of more rate hikes from the Bank of Japan's hawkish board member pushed up the yen. And South Korea's central bank governor tempers expectations about the next interest rate cut. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia Tonight. It is now time for business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, some good news, I believe, for U.S. shoppers who are waiting for their packages from Chinese retailers like Shein and Temu.
Yes, for now anyway. The U.S. Postal Service has reversed its quick pause on packages from China and Hong Kong today, saying it'll again accept shipments from China and Hong Kong, abruptly reversing a 12-hour suspension. But there isn't much clarity on what prompted the initial pause and the subsequent reversal. It comes after President Trump revoked a de minimis rule for China, which previously allowed small packages under $800 to enter the U.S. duty-free. The provision had been used by many e-commerce firms to send goods to the U.S. from China without having to pay taxes on them. The exemption was revoked as part of a new 10% tariff on goods from China that require postal providers to adjust customers and other protocols to comply with the levies. Some international couriers, including FedEx and SF Express, have said that they will continue to send packages to the United States. Hong Kong's Commerce Minister says that its government is considering launching a dispute with the WTO, but has dismissed concerns about the policy's impact. Meantime, the U.S. Postal Service's About Turn adds to the growing confusion over how to deal with the new tariffs. For more analysis and insight, we are joined by Thi Wang. He is Chief Investment Officer, Private Wealth Management at UOB Kay Hian. Thi Wang, good to have you on the show as always. Now, with the de minimis exemption taken away barely a day, now the U.S. Postal Service has done a U-turn, accepting parcels again from China, Hong Kong. What's behind the thinking here?
Well, it kind of shows you that this whole so-called trade war just started. It's very important to note that China is getting tariffs only from the U.S. in this round, while U.S. is trying to impose tariffs and other trade policies on almost everybody else in the world, including Canada, Mexico, and maybe Europe or even Japan. So you can kind of see that the context is perhaps more impact on U.S. than on China this time. We can expand more on that as well. So we're not too much worried. It is a big deal that Trump has started the so-called the trade policy with China. Another thing is that to note that is on Hong Kong. This is the very first time that the U.S. imposed something on Hong Kong. We didn't have that during the 2018 trade war, so definitely need to be monitored, the situation with Hong Kong.
I want to talk about Hong Kong's particular status, but let's move and talk about Hong Kong's Commerce Secretary Algernon Yao today, saying that he's considering launching a dispute with WTO. But he's also dismissed concerns about the potential tariffs' impact. What's your view on this?
Yeah, let's talk about the tariff impact first. Well, 10%, is that a big number or a small number? I mean, it's really in between. And even though I said earlier that this is the first time that Hong Kong got a direct tariff from the U.S., Hong Kong has experienced that in 2018. So Hong Kong was not immune to the 2018 trade war either. We already saw the impact on Hong Kong's transportation and the logistics industry from 2018, and we're likely to experience a similar impact on Hong Kong. So it's nothing we have not seen before. That's why if you look at the market, Hong Kong market trading today, in the beginning, the market was nervous, but eventually the market traded up, realizing, hey, maybe not as bad as people think. Obviously, the subsequent actions will be very important. Both China and Hong Kong try to fight back at the, you said earlier, under the World Trade Agreements. China is also using non-tariff, non-trade policies to try to get back to the U.S. So you probably saw the news about the anti-monopoly investigation into Google, the export controls on rare earth and other precious metals, as well as putting more U.S. companies on China's entity list. So China's response is there. It's diversified. It's not just trade against trade. We need to monitor very closely what the U.S. would do next. So far, I think whether this 10% tariff or the China's response is pretty benign.
Now, for Trump to treat Hong Kong the same as China suggests that the U.S. is suspending Hong Kong's status as a separate special administrative region, or SAR. I mean, Hong Kong is arguing that it's actually a separate standalone customs territory. What are the implications for the SARs, namely Hong Kong, Macau, if any?
Well, that's a great question. You hit the nail on the head. So this is, when I say what to watch next, it could be the hot topic, is how does the U.S. perceive Hong Kong? Under the current U.S. laws and regulation, Hong Kong is still treated separately from China under various U.S. and Hong Kong laws. The most recent revision, I think, was from 2019, still stating that Hong Kong should be treated differently by the U.S. government. However, this should be reviewed annually by the Congress. Now you have Trump in the White House and the Republican-controlled Congress. We wonder, will there be any risk to that special status in Hong Kong? We have not seen that yet, but definitely it's a big deal, not only from a trade standpoint, but also more from a financial standpoint. I think you asked the question earlier about, the trade center status of Hong Kong. I'm more worried about the financial center status of Hong Kong. One example being the Hong Kong dollar is pretty much predicated on the free flow of U.S. dollars in and outside of Hong Kong. If somehow there's any restrictions on that by the U.S., I think we may have some problems.
Okay, because the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the U.S. dollar. But it is unlikely for Hong Kong to depeg, given that China's renminbi's capital account isn't open yet, though.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, like I said, we will see what happens. I might have a outside-the-box view that there's no such thing as a depeg of the Hong Kong dollar. If by any small chance, and let me be very clear, there's a very little chance this will happen. By any small chance, the Hong Kong dollar, the so-called depeg, there may not be a need for the Hong Kong dollar, because Hong Kong dollar by now, by default, is and should be pegged to the U.S. dollar. If somehow the peg is done away, then why do we need a Hong Kong dollar?
Well, we'll certainly be following the developments by the day. That was Chi Wang, Chief Investment Officer, Private Wealth Management at UOB Kay Hian. Thank you for your time, sir. The Bank of Japan's most hawkish board member is urging the central bank to keep raising rates to deal with inflationary risk. His comments reinforce market speculation that more rate hikes are in the pipeline and pushed up the Japanese currency. The former commercial banker and board member Naoki Tamura says that the BOJ must raise the interest rates to at least 1% by early next year, adding that the bank needs to raise rates in a timely and gradual manner, or run the risk of further pushing up inflation. Now, his remarks follow recent data showing broadening wage hikes, including a survey showing a steady rise in the base salary in the month of December. The Bank of Japan's last month raised its benchmark rate to 0.5%, and analysts say the hike reflected Japan's conviction to sustainably achieve its 2% inflation target for this year. Governor Kazuo Ueda previously signaled his readiness to keep raising rates, but he has so far refrained from stating the exact level of Japan's neutral rate. The yen briefly strengthened to a two-month high of 151.81 against the dollar following the remark, softening somewhat afterwards. The Bank of Korea's governor is pushing back against mounting speculation of an interest rate cut later this month. In an interview with Bloomberg, Governor Ri Chae-yong says that he's a swift fiscal stimulus instead to shore up a sputtering economy threatened by higher Trump tariffs. Mr. Ri said the finance ministry's decision to keep a conservatively fiscal policy means that the country now has more fiscal resources to match the economic growth lost due to the martial law declaration last December. But the governor warns market conditions may affect the Bank of Korea's decision when the board meets again this month to update the year's GDP projection. Now, in January, the central bank held its interest rate unchanged at 3% in a bid to assess the impact of back-to-back cuts in late 2024. Remember, South Korea's economy barely expanded last quarter as anemic consumption and slackening exports weighed on activity, with the political turmoil adding to downward pressure. Japan's biggest steelmaker, Nippon Steel, saw an 18% drop in 9-month net profits to $2.4 billion amid sluggish demand in Japan and overseas. On its bid for U.S. Steel, which was blocked last month by then-President Joe Biden, Nippon Steel said that there can be no guarantee that the transaction will close. Nippon had been eyeing the deal to expand its global production capacity, gain a stronger foothold in the growing U.S. market, and to potentially counter the increasing influence of Chinese producers. Chip equipment maker Tokyo Electron beat expectations with robust sales, riding on the enthusiasm for artificial intelligence. The supply to the likes of TSMC and Samsung Electronics managed to bring in a profit of $1.3 billion. That's a jump of more than 50% over the same period last year. The company makes machines used to prepare, etch, and to clean silicon wafers in the making of semiconductors. The Japanese company's shares rose 2% by the end of the trading session in Tokyo before the release of its results. And that is the latest in business. Hotel.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, we're going to go for another break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, Ukraine says increasingly accurate North Korean missiles used by Russia could mean Pyongyang's received technological help with its projectiles. And a Japan Airlines Dreamliner clips a Delta plane on the ground in the U.S. Details next. You're watching East Asia tonight. South Korea becomes the latest country taking action against China's DeepSeek AI, with several ministries in Seoul blocking access on official devices, citing security concerns. Thailand's Prime Minister is in China, where President Xi Jinping praised Bangkok's cooperation and trust. Now, this is Paetongtarn Shinawat's first official visit to the Chinese capital since she took office last August. And Hong Kong's Commerce Minister dismisses concerns about the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs, but says his government is considering launching a dispute with the WTO. Well, Pushan Dutt, professor of economics and political science at INSEAD, explains the factors behind China's cautious response to President Trump's tariffs and how the U.S. leader is using these levies to pressure others.
There is actually an economic answer to it, and then there is a psychological answer to it where we try to look inside Donald Trump's brain. Okay, so, and these two things actually are equally important. So just taking the economic perspective, I think China is trying to have a very delicate balancing act. Okay, so they want to show that they will not be pushed around. So that's why the retaliatory tariffs come in. But at the same time, they are sort of very well calibrated. So if, for instance, just to give a concrete example, China has imposed a 15% tariff on U.S. LNG, liquefied natural gas. But the U.S. does not sell a lot of LNG to China. China doesn't buy a lot of LNG. So that's not going to have a very big impact. Similarly, the antitrust investigation of Google does not have major operations. And in fact, most Google products are banned in China. So of course, this is mainly symbolic rather than something effective. They are essentially signaling that they are open to negotiations and that they would want to talk to the Trump administration. And then we'll have to start thinking about what does the Trump administration actually want? Like, are they really serious about the welfare, well-being of citizens of the United States, or is it just Trump actually seeking to show a win there? So I think from Trump's perspective, what he really would want is signing a deal with a lot of favorable media coverage, maybe on the Great Wall of China, okay? And the consequences of it and the details of it, I think, are far less relevant to him.
Well, in other news, North Korean ballistic missiles used by Russian forces have reportedly been far more precise compared to previous salvos of the weapons that Moscow launched over the past year in its war against Ukraine. Well, two senior Ukrainian officials spoke to Reuters, saying that there was a notable improvement in the accuracy of the missiles in recent weeks, hitting within 50 meters of the intended target. The advancement reportedly appeared suddenly after months of inaccurate launches. And this could suggest that knowledge gained from the battlefield in Ukraine is helping Pyongyang further develop its missile technology. Well, the experts are also saying that such improvements would have troubling implications for the region, as North Korea could threaten South Korea, Japan and the US, or sell its upgraded weapons to armed groups. Pyongyang's military programs have developed rapidly in recent years. The country claims to have produced short and intermediate range missiles that can be tipped with nuclear warheads. North Korea had never tested its new weapons in combat until its involvement in Ukraine. Now, South Korea is planning to install bird detection cameras and radars at all airports across the country. Well, that's after the Jeju air crash that killed 179 people in December. Investigators are still trying to find out what caused the Jeju air disaster, the worst of its kind in South Korea. Authorities are also saying that they'll try to move orchards and food waste plants, places that attract birds, away from airports. And they'll also increase the use of sound devices to scare away those birds. The pilot had warned of a bird strike before the crash, and feathers were found in both engines of the plane. Now, a complex attempt to rescue a truck driver who was swallowed by a sinkhole in Japan has reached the 10-day mark. The 74-year-old man, who has been uncontactable since the incident, remains missing as of today. But in what authorities call a step forward, they have located through a drone survey what appears to be the truck's cabin, some 100 meters downstream in the sewage pipe. Authorities say physically reaching the deformed mass or metal remains a challenge due to the presence of hydrogen sulfide, a toxic and flammable gas, in fast-flowing sewage water. Officials have also asked fire departments, as well as the country's self-defense forces, for help. Rescue has been repeatedly hampered due to the growing sinkhole in Saitama, just northwest of Tokyo. It's now almost the size of an Olympic pool, with a 50-meter radius area around it under a safety advisory due to unstable ground. Now, a Japan Airlines plane collided with a Delta Airlines jet on the ground in Seattle, U.S. This comes a week after the deadly mid-air crash near Washington, D.C. that involved a passenger plane and an Army helicopter. In the incident, a taxiing Japan Airlines Dreamliner aircraft reportedly struck the tail of a parked Delta Airlines aircraft. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has paused some flights to the airport as a result of the incident and is investigating the small crash. Delta Air said all its 142 passengers have been transferred to another plane with no injuries reported. The Panama Canal Authority has denied a claim made by Washington that American government vessels will be allowed to transit the vital waterway for free. It released a statement saying that it has not made any adjustments to the tolls and other fees for transiting the canal. Well, this directly contradicts the U.S. State Department's claim that government vessels can now transit the Panama Canal without charge fees, saving the administration millions of dollars a year. Well, the State Department made the remarks in a post on X alongside an image of a naval vessel entering the canal. This latest controversy comes after U.S. President Donald Trump reiterated his vow to take back the Panama Canal. He's warned of powerful action against the Central American nation as a diplomatic dispute with Panama escalates over China's alleged presence around the canal. Now, the Trump administration is walking back the president's proposal to move all Palestinians out of Gaza and take ownership of the territory. The U.S. leader called for the permanent resettlement of Palestinians from the war-torn enclave and suggested deploying American troops there as part of a massive rebuilding operation. Well, the shock proposal has received swift and widespread opposition from officials around the world. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised it.
But the actual idea of allowing first Gazans who want to leave, I mean, what's wrong with that? They can leave, they can then come back, they can relocate and come back, but you have to rebuild Gaza. If you want to rebuild Gaza, you can't have, this is the first good idea that I've heard. It's a remarkable idea.
Mr. Trump claims that leaders in the Middle East support the idea, something that the Arab states have denied. Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry reiterated Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's commitment to establishing a Palestinian state and said this position is non-negotiable. Jordan, meantime, said that its king rejects any attempt to annex land and displace residents after Mr. Trump suggested that they take Palestinians in. And Qatar, a key mediator in securing a ceasefire deal, said that it is too soon to talk about who controls Gaza as they prepare to head into negotiations for the second phase of the agreement. Well, over the United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that the rights of Palestinians must be honored. He warned of the potential international crimes that may be committed in carrying out Mr. Trump's takeover plan.
In the search for solutions, we must not make the problem worse. It is vital to stay true to the bedrock of international law. It is essential to avoid any form of ethnic cleansing.
Malaysia echoed those statements from Mr. Guterres, saying that such actions would amount to ethnic cleansing and a violation of international law.
Kita menentang dan kita tidak bersetuju tentang cadangan untuk mengusir secara paksa rakyat Palestin. Apa yang disarankan, apa yang telah pun dicakapkan itu adalah merupakan sesuatu yang di luar fikiran yang waras. Dan ia bertentangan sama sekali dengan segala convention, segala piagam dan segala treaty antarabangsa.
The ministry said it supported a two-state solution as a path to lasting peace and stability. Indonesia also criticized the proposal.
Indonesia dengan tegas menolak segala upaya untuk secara paksa merelokasi warga Palestina atau mengubah komposisi demografis wilayah pendudukan Palestina. Tindakan semacam itu akan menghambat terwujudnya negara Palestina yang merdeka dan berdaulat sebagaimana dicita-citakan oleh solusi dua negara, two-state solutions, berdasarkan perbatasan 1967 dengan Yerusalem Timur sebagai ibu kotanya.
China is also rejecting the idea of a U.S. takeover of Gaza. Its foreign ministry today called on world powers to work together for the people of Gaza and not add insult to injury.
加沙是巴勒斯坦人的加沙，是巴勒斯坦领土不可分割的一部分，不是政治交易的筹码，更不能成为弱肉强食的对象。加沙已经饱受战火摧残，满目疮痍，哀鸿遍野。国际社会，特别是大国， 应携手为加沙人道援助和重建雪中送炭，而不是雪上加霜。
Time now for another break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, we'll be looking at what's driving a growing number of youths in Hong Kong away from employment on today's CNA Plus. Believe it or not, an increasing number of young people in Hong Kong are staying away from full-time jobs. A recent surveys say that nearly half of the city's Gen Z see themselves as failures, and many have no intention of finding a job. CNA's Insight this week takes a look at the young Hong Kongers who are taking a different approach to life.
The idea of a full-time 9-to-5 job has less appeal among the young. A significant portion of Gen Z are embracing freelance work, with 52% of Gen Z professionals engaging in freelance activities. Among these, more than half are freelancing full-time. As for Joyce, she isn't just a makeup artist. She holds multiple part-time jobs.
上一年啦，就開始覺得有陣時好大壓力嘅時候，發現自己都好中意整嘢食咁樣。咁我係有本身係有上烘焙班嘅，少少技巧，咁就試下去揾一啲 cafe 啊，去問下佢哋請唔請人整包咁樣。咁我就後尾就 in 咗一間 cafe 啦，咁就入咗去就幫手做 bagel。
Holding down multiple jobs has caught on with young Hong Kongers. They are known as slashers. This refers to the slashers that turn up in their job description. In a 2022 survey by the Hong Kong Federation of Youth Groups, nearly 4/5 of the people polled agreed that an individual could have multiple jobs at the same time.
好彩啦！咁嗰間 cafe 咧，其實都好 flexible 嘅返工時間。咁佢亦都知道我係 slash， 咁就所以佢知道我係有接 job， 咁佢就俾我可以彈性啲返工啊，或者係一啲我化完妝啊，或者我冇 job 接嗰啲日子啦，咁就可以去返咯。
But being in the slasher economy comes with risks.
我嘅收入咧就真係好飄忽嘅，有頭先都講係淡旺季嘛，咁所以咧有陣時咧係可能得10零 K， 但係有陣時可能可以30幾40 K 都嚟得咁樣，但係每個月太唔同嘅時候就都係睇下到時點樣運用啲錢咯。Slasher 咧嘅福利咧一定係冇 full time 咁完善啦，因為 full time 通常有啲公司係會俾埋醫療啊，或者係一啲保險上嘅嘢都做得好足。咁呢啲上面咧就係我哋自僱人士或者 slasher 要自己買，或者政府有啲可能政策可以俾我哋係方便啲去未雨綢繆咁儲錢啊，或者係一啲遇到突發情況都有個保障咧，其實都係一件好事。
The preference for freelance work, despite these drawbacks, points to another characteristic of Gen Zs. They are less inclined to consider long-term financial goals, preferring short-term gratification.
And for more on this story, we have Insight producer Nicholas Deroux joining us right here in the studio. So, Nicholas, from that story, I've just learned a new term, right? Slash, which is before, my time thinking that's a singer, but never mind about that. You've talked to a number of people while you were in Hong Kong covering this story, and what really stood out for you?
So, I spoke to a range of youths, right? So, they're all Gen Zs, but really the common thing that they tell me, surprisingly, is that they're all really afraid of boredom, and they get really bored very easily. And the more I, sort of talk to them and stuff like that, is that, they're a generation that grew up with social media, So they are constantly, engaged, they are stimulated, and they want those instant answers, So anytime that you put them to a task that is kind of repetitive or monotonous, they kind of just give up, It's not what they want. Because for them also, their time is really precious, right? So Gen Z really values their time. And these youths know that they are in the prime of their life, right? And so for a lot of them, they may not seek full-time jobs now. It's because they want to be able to enjoy their youth, right? So on the other hand, another thing that also kind of played a part is the pandemic, right? So during the pandemic, a lot of youths became isolated, and it broke social connections. And a lot of them started to develop, a lot of mental health issues like anxiety and depression. One of the profiles that I spoke to, Alex, he developed, kind of like depression during the pandemic. And that kind of like also kind of put him off finding a full-time job as well.
Yeah. So, I imagine these youths, whether they get bored easily, it's still bread and butter issue though. It's not quite cheap living in Hong Kong, for instance. So how exactly are they getting by?
You're absolutely right. It is not cheap to get by in Hong Kong. And so a lot of them are living with their parents, right? And so their parents are, some of their parents are a little bit more affluent, so they're able to afford the luxury of not working. Most of them keep their expenses pretty low. So they do a lot of free things like, going hiking, just hanging out with friends, reading, and, doing things that generally does not require a lot of money. On the point of, the high cost of living in Hong Kong, a lot of them also see these long-term goals as out of reach. So for example, housing is still, so expensive in Hong Kong. And so a lot of them actually don't aspire to either, buy a house or start a family, So, and without these long-term goals, they're just really focused on achieving their short-term goals, which is really maybe just buying a new device or just going on a short trip or traveling.
And that is really worrisome because a lot of them also see themselves as failures, right? That's how we introduce the story. So if these Gen Zs are shunning the full-time jobs, what does this mean for the future of work in Hong Kong? What's going to happen there?
So, I think that Gen Zs do want to work. It is not that they've completely given up. They do want to work, but they really want to work on their own terms. A lot of them are choosing part-time work because it gives them the flexibility that they want. This part-time work allows them to kind of like work and rest and work and rest, right? And that suits them, right? And a lot of it is also informed by the previous generations. They've seen the long working hours, they've seen the burnout.
Like yourself.
So, that is not what they want, right? And so I think that, Gen Zs are very clear about how valuable their time is and how they want to spend their time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting because it's quite clear that there are generational differences, right? When you speak to the Gen Z and other generations like yourself.
Yeah. So, again, going back to the thing about time, right? So they really value their time a lot. And so, if they are, at a job and they're not seeing, developmental opportunities, they're just gonna move on to the next thing. They value mentorship over a salary. Leaders are really important to Gen Z. They want a leader that they can look up to, that they can confide in. They want a leader that understands their issues so that they can then contribute. But if they're not seeing, any of that, or they feel like they're not moving up, in the ladder or getting promoted, then there's no loyalty, as some of them have told us.
我個人嚟講就覺得唔需要對一間公司 loyal， 因為我覺得如果你有 loyal， 即係好似有種係你唔走唔得，即係如果可能有一日你真係好想走嘅，你就會喺度思考我可能我下個月有份 project 要跟，或者我下個月有啲大嘅 event 要做的話就，但係我可能真係唔中意返呢份工咁，可能有樣嘢可能阻止咗我 quit 呢個衝動。
我覺得返得開唔開心都好重，即係人好重要咯，個 culture 都好重要，同埋佢個管理都好重要，即係你會 feel 到嗰間公司 organize 得好唔好啊，即係成個發展係點樣啊，呢啲都好 對我嚟講都好重要咯，因為我都唔想話淨係揾一份 hea 住嘅工作。咁如果我覺得呢間公司長遠嚟講 provide 唔到個 benefits 俾我，咁我就覺得及早離場。
So, Nick, you know, as you've mentioned that these Gen Zs, right? I mean, like loyalty at your workplace is no longer a thing, right? So, in the meantime, while they are job hopping around and the employer is looking at the resume and say, oh, you've got like 5 jobs in 2 years. I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Right. So there's definitely sort of this clash of generations, you know. On one hand, we have Gen Zs, who really, value work-life balance. They value the flexibility. They want the development, you know what I mean? Because they are really in charge of their own time. But on the other hand, you have a place like Hong Kong where the sort of working culture is still very traditional. You still have the long working hours. You have the emphasis on face-to-face interaction. You have that hierarchy, you know what I mean? And so when these two sort of generations, kind of meet, there's going to be a clash of these values. How they're going to resolve it, well, you got to watch the show to find out.
I know. I can't wait to check out what you have produced. Thanks so very much, Nick. And if you, like me, want to catch the rest of that episode, do tune in to Insight tonight at 9 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time on CNA, Video on Demand, or on our YouTube page. Right. The 9th edition of the Asian Winter Games set to begin tomorrow in the Chinese city of Harbin. This is the first time the Games are being held in 8 years. The 2021 Games were cancelled because of COVID-19. Well, skiing and snowboarding events will be held at a resort about 3 hours from Harbin. The location has one of the world's longest ski runs, nearly 3,000 meters. Now, nearly 1,300 competitors from 34 countries and regions are expected to attend. And when it comes to figure skating, 3 North Korean athletes have left to compete in Harbin. Ryeom Taeok and Han Kum-chol will compete in the pairs category, and Ro Young-myung in men's singles. Ryeom won bronze in the 2017 Games with her former partner Kim Joo-sik. 64 events across 11 winter sports are scheduled for the Games, and they include alpine skiing, snowboarding, ice hockey, figure skating, and for the first time, ski mountaineering. And of course, we will have more coverage for you tomorrow ahead of the Games opening with our correspondent here on East Asia Tonight. Do join us for that. And also ahead on Asia Tonight, here are some of the stories we'll also be covering. The Philippine Senate has announced that it will not hold the impeachment trial against Sara Duterte until after 2nd of June. Now that's when Congress is back in session after midterm elections. Malaysia's trade minister says that the new U.S. tariffs have little impact on his country's exports, even as other countries grapple with its potential impact. The country's trade minister says that he would continue discussions with Washington on measures related to semiconductors. And that's all we've got for you on East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And also look us up on Facebook and on YouTube. Thanks for watching.